You were listening to the Mark Petroni radio program, heard exclusively on News Talk Saga 960.
And we're back with more on News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this Tuesday edition of the Mark Petroni Show. We've got Miles Kristen on the line. He's about 30 miles outside of Madison, Wisconsin. Scene of an attack on an anti-abortion office, the headquarters, hit by an apparent Molotov cocktail. So here's vandalism, potentially dangerous. Apart from graffiti, vandals set a fire inside the Madison headquarters of the anti-abortion group Wisconsin Family Action. Happened on the weekend. Police and an official with the group said that this was a potentially dangerous investigation. Investigators are calling the fire at the building on Madison's north side near Dane County Regional Airport an arson. All right, so Miles, I understand this was picked up nationally because of the nature of the attack, of course, coming hot on the heels of the leak of this draft decision by the Supreme Court that could potentially overturn Roe v. Wade. Talk about what's going on. What's the mood like down there, Miles?
Well, our governor and our lieutenant governor, who is running for U.S. Senate, and all the Democrat politicians are coming out saying that they, oppose violence and these sorts of attacks and so forth. It would have been great if maybe they had done that in 2020 when Milwaukee and Madison and Kenosha were on fire. I mean, they wouldn't, none of them, I don't think, really said anything to discourage people from committing acts of violence. And in 2020, in places like Milwaukee and Madison, and Kenosha, you had these sorts of incidences where people were, lighting Molotov cocktails and lighting buildings on fire and doing these sorts of things. And so it's like, when the government just sits back and allows people to do those sorts of things for months on end. I mean, of course, now we're breeding these types of, and they're most definitely Antifa terrorists. I was just saying to somebody a moment ago, they probably caused a few $1,000s in damage to this building, and now that organization will probably receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations. This building that they hit the whole building didn't belong to that one group. I mean, there are actually, a local, buy local, Dane County buy local, I believe, is in the same building. And in the building next to it, their sister building, they actually have a pro-LGBT group and a international fair trade group. And it's just like in 2020 when they threw a Molotov cocktail into the Dane County jail, and it's like, well, they could have easily ended up killing the prisoners inside the jail. And it's just, these Antifa types are really, really dumb. And now that the federal government will be investigating, I wouldn't be surprised, not just that they catch these people, but that these are the exact same Antifa protesters who were involved in lots of the craziness of the last few years we've seen out in the Madison area.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there was the riots over Kyle Rittenhouse and what happened there. He, I guess, killed two people who were attacking him and shot. I guess he shot 3 people. I'm going back. So
the Rittenhouse case. What's so crazy about that is, I mean, there were so many lies about that whole incident. From like, why was he in Wisconsin, to the fact that he was actually shot at by a protester, and that was, not talked about at all until the very, very end. And of course, the incident was because Jacob Blake, who had been wanted for sexual assault and other crimes, who was trying to steal a car from his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend and was going for a knife and had been tased, got shot in the back. Then there was the riot in Kenosha. Then Kyle Rittenhouse, who was there, ended up, killing 2 individuals who attacked him, and the whole situation is just insane. And nobody ever talks about the fact that there were Black Lives Matter protesters also carrying weapons there in Kenosha, including the 3rd person who was shot by Kyle Rittenhouse.
Wow. All right. So are you expecting more violence? Is there an expectation that as the drama continues, I mean, I'm hearing that one of the judges, or more than maybe one of the judges involved in the decision, the draft decision, again, we don't even know if this is real or not. This has to be moved to an undisclosed location. We've had protests at the homes of some of these justices, and I suppose as this continues, then one would expect that perhaps some of these radicals, these Antifa types, are going to ramp up the violence. I mean, you said yourself that they took part in riots, and there was very little backlash especially from the left, who kind of turned a blind eye to some of the violence earlier. Do you expect that we could see sort of a summer of violence heading into the midterms in the fall?
Not exactly, because I would say the vast majority of individuals, as upset as they are, the vast majority of the people protesting about this issue are a very specific demographic of mostly white, middle-class women, angry but not, violent, not going to do destructive damage. This incident, as bad as it is, we're talking a very, small type of Antifa-like radicals. And I mean, they spray painted an anarchy symbol and some other stuff on the building, and it definitely looks of anarchist graffiti. And some people are saying that, oh, maybe this conservative Christian organization, did it to themselves. And I think that's hogwash. I think this was definitely some sort of an anarchist attack. Now, would other things like this possibly happen? I mean, I could see that as a possibility. And like I said before, I mean, these, Antifa types are really, really dumb, and you don't even need a large investigation to probably track these people down and stop them. Whether the government makes the effort to stop these sorts of people or not, I don't know, because considering how many times in the past they've allowed these people to riot and burn things to the ground and away with it. I mean, when State Street, this epicenter of Madison, Wisconsin, which goes from the Capitol to the university, State Street businesses were smashed up, beaten, looted for constantly, week after week for months on end. And it wasn't every single night, but every month there were several incidences of riots going on for at least 2-3 months. And you didn't even have the police or the city government release the CCTV footage of the individuals who did it. And I could watch protest footage earlier in the day where individuals had no mask on, and then you could tell white pants, red shirt, same person 3 hours later when it's dark, and they're covering their face, and they're literally raffling through a cop car that they stole a rifle out of a cop car. They burnt the cop car to the ground. I mean, it was the most insane stuff, and you could crack the case by watching some YouTube videos, and yet many of those rioters and looters got away with extremely criminal acts.
All right, has the defund the police campaign by the hard left, the Antifa types, BLM, has that undermined the police's inclination or willingness? I mean, a lot of cops want to do their job, but in the face of that campaign, do they kind of shrug and say, hey, look, if your attitude is to defund the law enforcement agencies in Wisconsin, then why should we bend over backwards to try to bust open some of these cases and go after the responsible ones?
Well, it's insane, because so you have a lot of the Democratic politicians have talked to their lobbyists and their consultants who explain to them what to do and say, and they've kind of come to the realization that defund the police is not a winning slogan. I mean, even Bill Maher knows that. And so the the politicians, except for the extreme, lefty politicians, a lot of the politicians have backed away from that issue. And now they're trying to, like my governor is trying to say, we're going to give more funding to the police. And it's like, yeah, okay, last minute trying to, save your election or whatever. And yet, at the same time, these hardcore, socialist types who actually get funding from the city government and the state government. There's a handful of organizations in Madison that, real, like, obnoxious socialist groups who are getting millions of dollars from city and state government. And they don't just want to, like, abolish the police. They basically want to free everybody from the prison, and they advocate this stuff, freeing everybody from the Dane County Jail simply based on ethnicity, not the crime that they committed or the severity of the crime. I mean, they want to. It's an insane racist idea of that we should free people from the jails just based on race, and these people advocate for it in the city and state government, and they've gotten funding from both Democrat governors and even our past Republican governor, Scott Walker. I think I said once before, Scott Walker actually helped fund some of these organizations, probably completely unaware of how radical they were. But Madison has a very serious, powerful, well-funded socialist type groups, and it's like the Seattle of the Midwest, basically.
Wow, what a mess. Well, hopefully things won't get much worse. I mean, in this case, there were no injuries. And as you point out, that anti-abortion office, that Wisconsin organization, was only one of a number of offices in there. And so it was an indiscriminate attack in that regard. It wasn't a laser-like assault on pro-lifers here. It was just, let's burn down a building. I mean, it's just one issue that group takes a stance on. They also have a much more conservative view on marriage and so forth, and but they had no regard for who or what was in that building. Same as how when they beat up State Street. I mean, what was the primary thing that got affected by the riots on State Street were immigrant-owned restaurants. And, we have this, like, community radio where you can't even say the word riot on it. If you call in and you talk about the riots, they cut you off immediately. They refer to it as the urban rebellion or the uprising. And it's like, how is it that the left can talk about respecting immigrants and then turn a blind eye when immigrants' businesses are demolished, destroyed, looted? I mean, it's just insane. Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, listen, thank you so much for filling us in on what's going on in that part of the state. And do you see this spreading, say, to some of the other locations, like Milwaukee, for instance? Is that a possibility that maybe even other urban centers will see this type of violence?
I mean, the hardcore anarchist type, I'm sure they just love looking at things like this. And like I said, I mean, they look at, they broke a window and, burnt, part of an office. They don't realize that, they just probably made this organization a lot more well-known and wealthy. And it's like a cause and effect, and pendulum always swings back and forth,
Yeah, especially when you've got an election coming up in the fall. I mean, the midterms. Is there much talk about that in Wisconsin? I mean, there's a strong belief that the Republicans are in pretty good shape going into that. But I mean, you never know, right? Go ahead.
So if you'd asked me like 2 weeks ago, what I thought about the midterms, I would just assume that my governor was going to lose, and that the Republicans would take the House and the Senate. And then now with Roe versus Wade coming up to such a huge level of a question of debate and so forth in this election. For instance, our former lieutenant governor is now running for governor. She has a primary. She may or may not win that. but she's the type of individual who is against abortion, even in cases of rape and incest and so forth. And it's like, I know that there are Republicans who are pro-choice. I know that there's also Democrats who are not pro-choice. But this issue might cause the Republicans to not win the governorship in Wisconsin. It could also affect who wins the House or Senate. I mean, I think that it's really disgusting is that the Democrats are all coming out now using this issue to try to make them win the primary, make them get more money for their campaign. It's really awful pandering. And I even know, like talking to someone the other day who's pro-choice, and they said that they thought how Mandela Barnes was pandering when he was asking for money after talking about Roe versus Wade for a few seconds.
Yeah. Well, it's just madness, but I guess it's to be expected. This is going to be a very interesting and heated election campaign. And so thank you very much for coming on the show today, Miles.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. Miles Kristen, our friend from Wisconsin, coming to us from not far from the Madison area. That's it for this edition of the Mark Petrone radio program. So very glad that you could tune in. Let's do it again tomorrow. Be safe, be strong, my friends. We'll do it again soon. Bye-bye for now.